mindset is important. Actually, she kind of forced us to read it. Your goals are more than possible. Hey there, dancers. It's Kirsten. Welcome back to Twin Talks Ballet. If you're new here and you don't know me, I'm a former professional ballet dancer and now a mindset coach for dancers. And I hope you'll enjoy sticking around on my YouTube channel for practical and powerful tips and advice on how to flourish as a ballet dancer. One of my favorite ways to flourish, not just as a dancer, but as a person, is to continually be educating myself. And I recommend that to all sorts of dancers, whether I'm working with them as a mindset coach or when I'm teaching a ballet class or just when I'm talking to a fellow dancer or friend. I always find myself recommending podcast episodes, videos I've watched that were empowering, and books that I just find to have been so transformative to me in my perspective as a person. And so I wanted to make this video today to share with you some of the resources that I find myself recommending the most, not only to mindset coaching clients, but friends and just people I know in real life all the time, so that you can really equip yourself with not only some inspirational content, but in my opinion, more importantly, information that you probably don't get access to just in your normal social circles within the ballet world. One of my personal beliefs is that it's really important to expand your perspective outside of the ballet world. Even if your goal is to get better as a ballet dancer in your technique, it's really important, I think it's really awesome as well, to learn from other disciplines, to read a book that's not explicitly ballet related, and to continue to see the lessons you learn there and ask yourself, how can I apply that to my ballet journey? Maybe if you're reading a book about tennis, for example, you could take some of those lessons metaphorically and apply them practically to your own ballet class. So I want to stretch you a little bit, challenge you to read one of these books I'm going to recommend to you. Two of them do happen to be ballet related, maybe three, but many of them aren't. So I want to invite you to stretch yourself a little bit, try something new, and see what you learn. And I'd love to hear from you as well in the comments down below. What is one of your favorite books to read, or videos that you've watched this year, or podcasts that you listen to that you've just found to be so helpful and impactful for you in your life and in your ballet journey? I'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and comment down below. And as well, go ahead and like this video if you do really enjoy this content. It helps the channel out a lot and I'd really appreciate it. So the first book I'm going to recommend, yes, it does in fact have tennis in the title. I did not bring that up earlier by coincidence, but this book is called The Inner Game of Tennis. This book was written by W. Timothy Galloway, and specifically I do want to emphasize that this book is called The Inner Game of Tennis. And the subtitle here, which I think is important to read to you, is The Classic Guide to the Mental Side of Peak Performance. This book is actually one that one of my teachers at Houston Ballet recommended to my class. Actually, she kind of forced us to read it. And at the time, I was like, why are we reading this book? I don't think I was fully on board with reading it, but I think it really did plant a seed in my mind of, mindset is important in learning how to perform well consistently and confidently and at your personal peak level. It's really interesting. I briefly skimmed through this book. I read it years and years and years ago. And then I just want to share this personal story because I think it's funny and interesting. Just this past year, I was listening to a podcast by Michael Lewis. I'm pretty sure if you type in Michael Lewis podcast, it would come up. They had a whole season on coaching, and I found it to be really, really interesting as a coach. Of course, they cover all sorts of different kinds of coaches, vocal cord coaches, mindset coaches, sports coaches, finance coaches, and I found the season to be so cool. And actually, I was listening to one of the episodes, and this guy was interviewing someone who was talking about mindset, and throughout this interview, I was like, this guy's, his concepts, they sound familiar. Then I was like, wait, hold on. Is this the Inner Game of Tennis dude? And like 30 seconds later, it was like, and this is Timothy Galloway from The Inner Game of Tennis. I was like, that, oh my gosh, my teacher had me read that book. And what's so cool is that all these years later, never could have imagined that I'd be doing what I'm doing now as a mindset coach for dancers. It's just so crazy that at, 8 years ago when I first read this book, it was like, mindset stuff. What is that? And now that's my job. And then listening to this podcast was like, oh, so full circle. So anyway, this book, why I recommend it so much to mindset coaching clients, students I teach, or dancers I work with in the Mindset Plus Movement Technique Accelerator program that I do, which combines technical coaching with mindset coaching. Why I recommend this so much is that the author really simply and brilliantly gives us education on how to effectively partner your conscious and your subconscious mind to have the ability to perform at your personal best level with as little mental friction and blockages as possible. I think this is such a critical read for all dancers because the way we are taught to think as dancers is to focus, to try hard, to tell yourself to remember things, to tell certain muscles to engage. And we often get so cerebral, we get so in our conscious thought and conscious effort, conscious mind to produce certain actions that we actually distract ourselves from letting our bodies already know what they know how to do through all the programming, all the effort, all the hours that we put in to develop muscle memory. That muscle memory is so effective if we let it do what it knows how to do. And this book really provides very helpful illustrations for understanding how to quiet that inner critic that we have that often distracts us so much when we're trying to dance. You know, that voice that's like, what are you doing? Don't stand in front. You don't know what you're doing. Wait, were you really paying attention? You don't know the combination. You know, things like that really distract us from performing well. This book really does help to have just at least a fundamental, simple, actionable understanding of how to quiet your mind and perform the way you are capable of performing. Heck, even better than you probably think you are capable of. So definitely, if you read any of these books, read this one. The second book I love to recommend, especially to mindset coaching clients when I'm working with a dancer to increase their confidence, to overcome insecurities that consistently hold them back in the studio and keep them just frustrated and miserable instead of enjoying what they're doing. I love recommending this book, which is Everything is Figureoutable by Marie Forleo. Personally, I love listening to this on Audible specifically because the author, Marie Forleo, narrates the book and she's so fun to listen to. She's very animated and she really brings her own stories to life. So what I love so much about the book is that she's sharing really helpful, powerful strategies for getting out of overwhelm and taking action, for getting clarity on what your goals are. I think one of the biggest powers of the book is that she tells stories that simply help you to build belief that your goals are more than possible. And what I notice in so many dancers, what holds them back is they have big dreams. You know, they want to be in a professional company. They're taking all the steps to do it. They're putting in so much effort. They're training so hard and they say they want this, but on the inside, they don't really believe they can do it. And that incongruency will just eat you up from the inside. It'll create self-sabotaging behaviors where you're like, okay, I want to put myself out there, I'm ready to go. But that deep-seated belief that I can't do this, I'm not good enough, actually causes it to be a self-fulfilling prophecy where you actually mess up. You're so unfocused, you're so stressed out that you do mess up and you're like, see, I knew I wasn't good enough. See, I cracked under pressure. I can't do this. See, those people don't like me. These beliefs just honestly manifest themselves constantly. And so my job as a coach is not only to help people resolve those beliefs, but build an empowering, authentic sense of belief that through action and focused effort and commitment to their goals, they can achieve it. And that creates one of the most powerful mental states, which I believe is congruency. When you do what you say you're going to do, you believe that you can do what you want to do, and your actions line up with that. Your character lines up with that. Your beliefs, your thoughts, your feelings, they all line up with that. It's called also being in alignment. What I love about this book is she shares such powerful stories of people honestly doing things that most would think are impossible. She makes them very personable stories, and it honestly, I've read the book twice. Every time it just fills me with this motivation that like, you know, I should make my goals bigger. And I also have practical, helpful ways to start taking steps towards my goals and reframing my mindset to help me get there. So I would definitely recommend this book. Hey dancers, I want to just briefly pause today's video to thank the generous sponsor, which is, as usual, balletok.com. I'm so grateful for their ongoing support. Of course, I partner with them on a monthly basis to tell you guys about Zerly Tights, my favorite brand of tights, and I'm so grateful that they support this channel so that I can continue to share these messages with dancers all over the world. And the way that you can support today's generous sponsor is to order Zerly Tights through the balletok.com website. Zerly Tights are, as I've talked about many times, my absolute favorite brand of tights. Very truly, from the black tights in the Z1 model, the Z2 Perform model. You can get them, by the way, with a back seam or no back seam. There are 2 different colors of pink, if I'm not mistaken, and I just love the variety they offer. In addition to the Z3 Repair tights, Z3, yes. These are so cool because they actually have an added amount of compression so that your legs can really rest and recuperate through better blood flow to ease tension, recover faster between workouts while also wearing them with a cute little outfit, like a wintry outfit, you know? I don't know about you, but I like to wear skirts and dresses with black tights underneath and black boots, and these tights are both very cute and very productive and functional because it'll leave your legs feeling so much better and so much more refreshed when you go into the studio the next day. Balletok.com also has a tights recycling program where you can get a free shipping label, send away your old ugly tights that you're not going to wear anymore. They'll recycle them, which is so awesome and very, very cool, very unique as well. And then you get a sweet little discount code on your next order of new Zerly tights. Thank you again, Balletok.com, for sponsoring this video. The third book I love recommending is called David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. I personally love Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, Revisionist History, and several of his other books. What I love about this book is for the dancer who says, I started late, so I can't be a professional dancer, or I come from a small studio and no one from my studio has ever made it in the professional realm, so I won't either. Or I have a long torso and short legs, so I won't make it. You know, all of these limiting decisions about what is possible for them based on their past or based off of perceived disadvantages. And what this book does so powerfully is it illustrates the very practical advantages to certain levels of having a disadvantage, as it's commonly labeled by ourselves and our communities. I really enjoy recommending this book to dancers who really feel stuck in a state or a belief of feeling disadvantaged. And what they commonly accomplish through reading this book is a reframing of their mindset that, you know, I can actually see now how I can use my disadvantages as an advantage to me going forward. So you don't have to ignore your past, but you can actually use it to accomplish meaningful goals in your life. Next, I want to recommend Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. It's a classic. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of it. It's been a while since I've read it, but I just think that it is such a powerful read for dancers who, honestly, I think most of us associate to that feeling that dance can be extremely vulnerable. You have to put yourself out there all the time and to be willing to have people see your mistakes, honestly, in order to be sane and to be successful in the ballet industry. The reason I say to be sane is that if you are under the illusion that you can try hard enough to hide the fact that you're a human being and that you make mistakes, I think you'll just spend so much of your effort trying to hide it that you also become paranoid in the process and hide what is beautiful about you. I find myself most often in recommending this book to dancers who find themselves holding back from standing at the front of the room or raising their hands to understudy for a position or just saying, yes, I can show the step, whatever it is. If you find yourself frustrated with how often you're like, gosh, I should have raised my hand. The other girl raised her hand and, you know, she got the attention and then she got the part or whatever it is. If that's you, which I've totally been there before, I highly recommend this because it's a book that delves into the strength and the importance of vulnerability in the process of daring greatly and putting yourself out there and accomplishing big things. Next, I want to recommend a book called The Third Door. I listened to this one on Audible a couple months ago and I was just so captivated by the story. The Third Door is by Alex Manayan, and essentially he started his journey of writing this book with the mission of getting inside of the minds through interviews with some of the world's most successful people. Bill Gates, Oprah, the founder of TED, you know, like TED Talks, that guy, all sorts of people. He really sought out to interview these people to seek wisdom on, for his generation, which at the time he was in college when he was writing this book. He wanted to gain wisdom from them for his generation on the principles for massive success. What's so interesting about the book is it turns out to be something completely unexpected. And the reason I love sharing this with dancers is because his concept, which, and the reason why this book is called The Third Door, is that so many people are discouraged when they look at the common path to success. They're like, well, I don't fit into that line of people. It's going to take years and years and years for me to get there. And I don't know if I can wait that long until I get into a company or whatever. The principle that he's weaving into these stories that he's telling is that there's this concept called the third door, which is this idea that there's not just one or two paths to success, but there's a third door that very few people see. And if they see it, very few people are actually willing to take it. The reason why I find myself recommending this book is because so many dancers really perceive that there is one path, one way to success as a dancer. You know, you have to go to a big school, you have to become serious at ballet when you're like 11 or 12, you have to go on point before you're 12, and then you have to go to all the great summer intensives, and your family has to have a bunch of money, and then you have to go to the cattle call auditions, and if you don't get a job by 18 years old, then you're screwed. What I love about this book is it's a huge metaphor for the idea that there isn't just one path, and especially not just one definition of what success is. I think this book also brilliantly illustrates that cliche of, you know, it's not the destination but the journey that's important. It is super cliche, but this book brings that concept to life as to what that could look like for someone and how meaningful it is to have an enriching journey and to not only accomplish your goals, but to be proud of who you become in the process. The book is also insanely entertaining. I just recommend it to people for an inspirational read that really expands your mind as to what is really possible when you're willing to do anything and to get very creative and resourceful to do the things that you want to do in life. I actually have two specifically ballet related books to recommend to you guys. Don't worry, I am still a little bunhead inside. And so the two books I'd recommend, I actually have them in physical form with me here. The first one is Dancing Through It by Jennifer Winger. Actually, my Aunt Kelly, love her. Hi Aunt Kelly if you're watching. I'm not going to reveal her age, but she still dances on point and is such a boss in the ballet studio. And I'm like, look at you, Aunt Kelly. What an inspiration. She sent me this book, Dancing Through It, and I read it over Christmas break one time. And I just found it to be so encouraging and relatable. We look at these principal dancers in companies like ABT and New York City Ballet. We just think everything about their life must be perfect. They must not struggle. You know, all their dreams came true. And I am just so appreciative for Jennifer Winger very vulnerably and openly sharing her story, which was so hard. She went through a very tough time, which, you know, for the YouTube algorithm, I can't say exactly what she struggled with. It was an eating issue. And I'm just so encouraged that Jennifer shared her story and brought light to how she eventually got out of it and what she learned on the other side, having struggled with an eating issue and coming back into ballet, finding hope in the midst of intense darkness for her, and what it was like to have that redemptive process of coming back into ballet as a much more mature person with a lot more perspective and strength. I highly recommend this book to everybody. Side note, I made an Instagram post about it, like I think 3 years ago when I read the book, and she commented on my Instagram post and I was like, oh. Again, I'm still a little bunhead on the inside. I still freak out when stuff like that happens. The next book is Apollo's Angels, and this is by Jennifer Homans. I was required to read this book in college at the University of Utah. I received my BFA in ballet, and one of the courses I was required to take was ballet history. To be honest, I was kind of thinking maybe this class would kind of be a blow off. You know, I would try to be intrigued by it. I would learn a couple things, but I'd been to plenty of ballet history workshops and lectures before, and I just kind of thought, you know, like, how cool can this be really? I was overly cynical, okay? Forgive me. I'm not perfect. I ended up being so fascinated by this book. There's a reason why it's a bestseller. Personally, though I've looked at other sources and books to learn about ballet history, this is my favorite. I found it so captivating because what Jennifer Homans does is she beautifully ties in political and historical context and how outside situations in the world that ballet was developing in, how those things infiltrated the practice of ballet, the traditions, what we now consider to be normal. And really, it's so fascinating how political ballet was at times, how revolutionary it was. What is so interesting as well is how much ballet has evolved throughout just a few centuries. So I would highly, highly recommend that you read this book. I found that after I did, I had a deeper connection with ballet as an art form. It really helps me to feel like I was telling a story, I was participating in history each time I created art with this medium of ballet. I think it just built my understanding of how complex the history of ballet is and how we got to where we are today. Now I want to move on to recommending TED Talks. 3 of the TED Talks that I find myself consistently recommending is first, the TED Talk by Carol Dweck about the growth mindset and why it's so important. If there is one mindset, put very, very simply, that I see holds back a majority of dancers I teach, talk to, and work with as a coach, it is the fixed mindset. I would say it is literally a plague within the ballet community that keeps highly competent, intelligent, hardworking dancers, humans who are full of potential, in my opinion, it keeps them small. And this fixed mindset is so important to identify and shift into a growth mindset. The difference between the two, which many of you have heard of, I talk about it all the time in my videos, it's the fixed mindset says, I've only achieved 2 pirouettes and I haven't been able to do a triple, so I'm just not good at turns and I can't do a triple pirouette. That is a fixed decision based off of a limited amount of evidence from a specific amount of time. The growth mindset would say, like in Marie's book, everything is figureoutable. Let's see, what else can I try? I haven't done it yet, but there's got to be a way. The growth mindset is playful. It's willing to, instead of just creating snap judgments, have belief in the long-term possibility and to be adaptable and creative and trying different approaches until you get there. The second TED Talk I find myself recommending all the time is You Are Contagious by Vanessa Van Edwards. This one is so helpful and also so fun to watch. Vanessa is so fun. Why I recommend this talk so much is Vanessa breaks down the science and the personal significance of mastering your body language to develop not only great relationships, but also to present yourself in the way that you want to be received. I talk to dancers all the time, especially in the Mindset Plus Movement Technique Accelerator program, about how they can actually adapt their body language in ballet class, as they dance, as they stand, in any point throughout their day actually, to start to not only rewire their mind to become confident, but also to project to others that body language of confidence, which then you get feedback from them as if you are really confident. And then it gives you that positive feedback loop like, oh, they reacted to me that way. And I guess I am confident. Yeah. And it actually builds an extremely positive and empowering cycle that actually develops in you a belief and a sense of identity that, oh, I am a confident dancer, which is one of the most empowering identities that I think you can have in the ballet studio. The third TED Talk that I find myself recommending specifically to dancers who are in the midst of a transition, maybe they're contemplating taking a different direction with their careers. So the reason I recommend this TED Talk by Tim Ferriss, I feel like he is the king of personal development these days. Everyone knows his book, The 4-Hour Work Week. If you haven't yet heard of it, you have now. Also, for a lot of people who are entrepreneurs like me, it's a super popular read. But what I love about this TED Talk is it's called Why You Should Define Your Fears or Set Your Fears Instead of Your Goals. And the reason why I recommend it to dancers who are struggling to make a choice about their future is because a lot of times what we struggle to do when we're in that state of fear, stress, and confusion is we struggle to say, positively, this is the outcome in life I want, because all of these thoughts come up of like, but what if this happens? But what if this plan falls through? But what if I can't? And what this strategy that Tim Ferriss has developed does is it allows you to look your fears straight in the face and to actually not ignore them, but to resolve them, to walk through them and say, okay, if the worst case scenario happened, what would I do? You go from overwhelm and anxiety to looking specifically at the things that scare you. You realize, hey, that's actually not as scary as I thought it was. I'm actually not as helpless as I thought I was. And if the worst case scenario happens, I have a plan of action. And by doing that, I find that dancers I work with have been able to actually, for the first time, say, you know what? I am confident now in making this decision about my future. I have a plan of action no matter what happens. I know I'll be okay. And by addressing the fears, they're finally able to resolve that worry and look towards the positive things they want to create in their future. So if that's you, I'd highly recommend checking out this TED Talk. So lastly, I will finish up with just one podcast recommendation. This podcast that I want to recommend is called The Happiness Lab by Dr. Laurie Santos, and I believe she is a professor at Yale. The reason why I really enjoy recommending this podcast specifically to mindset coaching clients is because so many of these episodes, particularly three I find myself recommending the most often, A Silver Lining. I love this episode because it brilliantly illustrates concepts I often share through stories and powerful metaphors that really allow these concepts to register. So the concept in A Silver Lining is how our minds are geared towards comparing ourselves to others, and how becoming aware and intentionally choosing your frame of reference for what is good can set you free from really damaging insecurities and just crippling comparisonitis, as I often call it. I didn't coin that term, but I hear it floating around often. I think it's very descriptive of what happens when you are constantly looking around at your peers and you're like, oh, she can do that and I can't. And then you feel insecure. It's just no way to live, am I right? The next episode that I recommend very frequently is Dial D for Distracted. The reason for that is because this episode illustrates the psychological phenomenon of selective attention. We're familiar with how you can have this confirmation bias of what you search for, your mind draws back to your conscious awareness evidence of those beliefs or those things that you set it to search for. But what this podcast goes a little deeper into is how you're not only selectively aware of specific things, but you can become literally blind to possibilities you are not looking for. And so I love this episode because it instantly expands your perspective as to what solutions could be out there, possibilities for you, potentials for you personally, and how much you can do in this life, even options for how you can perceive yourself as a person. So I would highly recommend this episode to any dancer. The other podcast I would love to recommend to you guys is Ballet to Business by my good friend Jordan Tilton. So I, first off, love Jordan. You should follow her on Instagram. I'll have her linked below. Also follow Ballet to Business on Instagram and of course the podcast. I love this podcast. I happen to be on it. I'm not recommending it just because I was on it. You can listen to my episode or don't. I don't care. But I want you to go listen to this podcast that she's created because what she's done with it is she has interviewed dancers who have gone from dancing professionally or even recreationally to then creating their own business. And she beautifully ties together how even though some of them don't have a ballet related business at all, actually many of the dancers on this podcast don't have a ballet related business, but she ties in how even the unexpected and sometimes difficult twists and turns in their journeys as dancers led to business ideas or ways that they have leveraged their ballet expertise and training to be successful in other industries. I think it is so empowering. I wish I had access to this podcast when I was a young dancer because I used to be so worried that my skills as a dancer would never translate in another career. I was so worried that no one would get what I did as a dancer and that I would just be seen as someone who just wasted my time on some dream. So I was so fixated on I have to have a backup plan that seems legit. I have to go into something like finance. And what this podcast does is it shows, I think, all dancers how what you're doing right now could very well lead to a fulfilling and successful career if you are resourceful, if you don't throw away your past, but you rather seek to learn from it and become a person with more experience, wisdom, and depth of character that you can then use in any sort of career. Also, it really beautifully illustrates how oftentimes the challenges we go through in our lives are the things that make us become aware of what we want to help other people with. I highly recommend listening to this podcast. Go through a bunch of episodes. I think you'll be so inspired by what fellow dancers have created, and it will perhaps cause you to see yourself in your future differently and in a more empowered light. So dancers, I hope you really enjoyed this video. I loved sharing these resources with you. I would love to hear in the comments below which one of these books or resources that you are excited to dive into and what resources you love to recommend to fellow dancers. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and also be sure to check out the links below to my website, KirstenKemp.com, if you're interested in working together, if you're interested in mindset coaching or the technical coaching that I offer. I would love to work with you. So learn more about my services there. And other than that, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.